14 through 17. When Jesus entered Peter's house, he saw his mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she got up and began to serve him. That evening they brought him to many who were possessed with demons, and he cast out the spirits with the word, and cured all who were sick. This was to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took our infirmities and bore our diseases. Good morning, everyone. It is great to, let me see here. It's great to see all of you here in this sanctuary and also to see you in our virtual sanctuary. It is good to be in this place to celebrate God's great love for us. Friends, today we are going to conclude our Lenten sermon series, which I have entitled Only Jesus. We have, so far in this sermon series, considered 5 people that Jesus Christ encountered on the road that ultimately led him to Easter. Only Jesus could take the road that led to Easter. Only Jesus could take this road because along this road, it was his singular focus to overturn barriers, the barriers that prevent humanity, them and us and all people, the barriers that prevent us from understanding and receiving God's love. So far in this sermon series, we have met a blind man by a gate, a woman at a well in the middle of the day, a bride and a groom on their wedding day, Nicodemus, a Pharisee, in the middle of the night. And today we are going to consider the plight or the encounter that Jesus had with a sick mother-in-law, a mother-in-law who was so sick she was in bed. Her headquarters was her home was the headquarters for Jesus' ministry when he was ministering in the northern region of Israel, in a town called Capernaum. Well, to be precise, her home was the home of her son-in-law, the Apostle Peter. It was his home in which she lived. Scholars believe that Peter's home in Capernaum was located very close to the synagogue, and so when Jesus was in Capernaum, he was frequently resting at Peter's house or staying at Peter's house when he was in town, and that's what was going on just prior to this story. Before arriving at Peter's house, Jesus had spent the entire day at the synagogue preaching and teaching in this astonishing way that was capturing the attention of people. He was very tired by the time he left and expected that when he arrived at Peter's house that he would be able to have a meal and decompress. However, as you heard, when he got there, Peter's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever that was understood to be deadly. It would take her life. She was very sick, and so Jesus healed her. To understand the significance of Jesus' action in this moment, we have to ponder 2 things. Both the fever that he healed, and second, the person that he healed, a mother-in-law. In the first century, which is when this story occurred, it is likely that not only was Peter's mother-in-law living in his home, but his own mother was likely living in the home. So that in and of itself probably had its challenges that needed to be navigated. A mother and a mother-in-law living in a home, and they both like to cook. So that in and of itself might be challenging at times. Complicating matters even further is that in the first century, women didn't entertain or have the rights that they have in our culture today. So, for example, in the community, they could not occupy a position of leadership. They couldn't vote. They couldn't register their opinion on anything. And it was similar in their own homes. They were in charge of all that needed to happen to make the home work. So, for example, they could make the meal, serve the meal, but they couldn't actually sit down at the same table with their husbands, their sons, and their male relatives. This is in their own homes to eat the meal. To eat the meals, they would have to go into another room where there were only the children and the women. Even in their faith lives, women were seen as inferior. So when they went to worship in the synagogue, as it was in their homes, it was also in their worship services. They could not sit as all of you are sitting. They could not sit in their family setting if they wanted to. They could not sit with their husbands, their sons, or their male relatives. They had to go into another part of the synagogue, which was considered the women's room, not restroom, the room where all of the women had to go. And it wasn't a good room. I mean, there was no sound being piped in. They couldn't see what was going on. They couldn't interact with anyone. And their own faith tradition excluded them even further from spiritual care. There were religious laws in place that said it was illegal for a woman to approach her rabbi, to speak to her rabbi, to ask her rabbi to pray for her. So you guys can all just text me, right? If you want to talk about something, if you want me to come to your homes and pray with you, or if